Serve us, B times T. Teenagers harassed a black waitress. Then 200 bikers walked, in shocking the whole restaurant. The loud chime of the diner bell announced the arrival of the local elite, a group of private school teenagers whose designer clothes screamed entitlement. Maya's stomach tightened as they slid into booth 7, led by Corey Matthews, whose perfectly styled hair and arrogant sneer she recognized instantly. She approached their table, carrying water glasses. "About time," Corey drawled, not bothering to look up from his phone. His friends snickered. "Welcome to Jerry's. Can I start you all off with something to drink?" Maya asked, maintaining her professional mask. The orders came in, delivered without eye contact. Corey finally looked up, his lips curling into a sneer. "Hey guys, watch this." He deliberately knocked his water glass with his elbow, sending it toppling. Water splashed across Maya's sensible shoes. "Oops," he said with exaggerated innocence. His friends burst into mocking laughter. Maya took a deep, steadying breath. "Let me clean that up for you." As she bent to mop the spill, Corey's voice cut through the air like a whip. "Serve us. B times Tish." The words were a physical blow. Her hands trembled slightly, but she kept her face carefully neutral, the mask she'd perfected over 25 years firmly in place. The teenagers' cruel laughter echoed, and other diners quickly looked away. Maya rose, her chest tight. "I'll be right back with those shakes," she said quietly, her voice miraculously steady. She pushed through the kitchen doors, the casual cruelty and entitled smirks of the teenagers pressing down on her shoulders. Leaning against the wall, she fought for steady breath, the fluorescent lights humming over her head. She could still hear their laughter carrying through the door's window. She straightened her apron with trembling fingers. This was her job, her livelihood. She couldn't afford to let them win. She took one last breath, smoothed her neat bun, and prepared to walk back into the dining room, knowing she had to absorb their cruelty one more time. The direct action against her dignity was complete, but her survival instinct was still fighting back. Maya stood in the back of the diner, her hands pressed against the cool metal of the prep counter. The kitchen's familiar sounds, the sizzle of the grill, the clinking of dishes, the whoosh of the dishwasher, couldn't drown out the laughter from those teenagers. Her fingers trembled slightly as she reached for a paper towel to dab at her eyes. 25 years of serving tables, and still, moments like these cut deep. The words echoed in her head, "Serve us, B times." She'd heard worse, but today it felt heavier, like each syllable carried the weight of every similar incident she'd endured over the years. The swinging door to the kitchen creaked open. Maya quickly straightened up, expecting to see Tom, the cook, or maybe Sarah, the other waitress. Instead, a tall figure filled the doorway, his silver hair catching the fluorescent kitchen lights. The leader of the bikers moved with surprising grace for such a large man, his weathered face etched with concern. "You okay?" His voice was gentle, almost tender. Not at all what you'd expect from someone wearing a leather vest covered in patches. His eyes, a deep brown that had clearly seen their share of trouble, met hers with genuine concern. Maya tried to wave it off, mustering a weak smile. "I'm fine, really. Just needed a moment. Name's Jack Thompson," he said. "But everyone calls me Hawk." He leaned against the counter, not too close, giving her space while making it clear he wasn't going anywhere. "Been coming to diners like this my whole life. Seen a lot of good people take abuse they don't deserve." The kindness in his voice made Maya's carefully constructed walls crack just a bit. She found herself taking a shaky breath. "It's nothing new," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "Doesn't make it right," Hawk replied, his tone carrying a quiet authority. "Sometimes the hardest storms we weather aren't the ones with thunder and lightning. Sometimes they're the quiet ones that wear us down, day after day." Maya looked at him then, really looked at him. His face was lined with age and experience, but there was something in his eyes, a familiar pain, perhaps, that told her he understood more than she'd expected. "You've got good instincts," he continued, crossing his arms. "I can tell you're strong, but being strong doesn't mean you have to face everything alone." The kitchen door swung open again as Sarah poked her head in. "Maya, table 6 needs more coffee." Hawk straightened up, giving Maya a small nod. "Take your time. My guys and will be out there when you're ready." The way he said it carried a promise of support, not threat. Maya took a deep breath, feeling the tightness in her chest begin to loosen, if only slightly. The weight of the situation, the teenager's cruel words, the unexpected kindness from this stranger still pressed on her shoulders, but somehow it felt more manageable now. She smoothed her apron, checked her reflection in the stainless steel surface of the prep counter, and squared her shoulders. The dining room waited, with all its challenges and uncertainties, but something had shifted. She wasn't alone anymore, and that knowledge gave her the strength to take another deep breath and prepare to face her customers again. Maya took several deep breaths, squaring her shoulders as she grabbed her notepad from her apron pocket. The familiar weight of the pen in her hand gave her something solid to focus on. 25 years of waiting tables had taught her how to put on a brave face, even when her insides felt like they were crumbling. She approached Corey's table, her shoes making soft squeaks against the freshly mopped floor. The fluorescent lights overhead cast harsh shadows across the day. The teenager's smirking face. His friends huddled around him, some looking uncomfortable, others snickering behind their hands. "Are you ready to order?" Maya asked, keeping her voice steady and professional. She'd perfected this tone over the years, polite enough to avoid complaints, but distant enough to protect herself. Corey leaned back in his chair, his designer hoodie a stark contrast to the worn vinyl seats. He made a show of studying the menu, though Maya could tell he wasn't really reading it. "I don't know," he drawled, looking up at her with mock confusion. "Maybe if the service wasn't so slow, I would have had time to decide." Two of his friends shifted in their seats, exchanging uneasy glances. A girl with straight blonde hair stared down at her phone, her cheeks flushing pink, but Corey seemed energized by the tension, feeding off it like a shark that had caught the scent of blood. "I can give you more time," Maya offered, starting to turn away. "No, no," Corey said, his voice dripping with false sweetness. "I wouldn't want to make you walk all the way back here again. Must be tiring at your age." He emphasized the last word, earning a few nervous laughs from his friends. Maya's fingers tightened around her pen, but her face remained neutral. She'd heard worse over the years, much worse. Still, something about this boy's entitled attitude made the old hurts feel fresh again. "Hey," one of Corey's friends muttered, "maybe we should just order." But Corey wasn't finished. He picked up his empty water glass, swirling the ice cubes around. "You know what? I think I need a refill first. And this time, try not to shake so much when you pour it. Nobody wants your germs in their drink." At the counter, the bikers sat in perfect stillness. Their leather jackets creaked softly as they watched the scene unfold, their expressions unreadable. Not one of them moved or spoke, but their presence filled the diner like a gathering storm. Maya could feel their eyes on her, back, steady and watchful. The ice in Corey's glass clinked as he set it down harder than necessary, the sound sharp in the tense atmosphere. "Well?" he prompted, raising his eyebrows. "Are you just going to stand there?" Maya reached for the glass, her movements deliberate and controlled. She wouldn't give him the satisfaction of seeing her rattled. "I'll be right back with your water," she said quietly. Behind her, she heard the distinct sound of a heavy bar stool scraping against the floor. Hawk had risen from his seat at the counter. His boots made solid, measured sounds against the linoleum as he began walking toward her, each step as purposeful as a heartbeat. The diner seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. The slur hung in the air like poison. Maya's hands trembled slightly as she gripped her serving tray, her knuckles turning white. The diner's usual clatter of dishes and quiet chatter had died down to an uncomfortable silence. Hawk's weathered boots scraped against the linoleum floor as he rose from his seat at the counter. His silver hair caught the afternoon light streaming through the windows, and despite his intimidating size, his movements were controlled and deliberate. The leather of his jacket creaked as he made his way toward Corey's table. "Sit down, son," Hawk said, his voice low and steady. Though quiet, his words carried across the hushed diner. "No one talks to people like that, especially not here." Corey's face flushed red, a mix of embarrassment and anger flashing across his features. His designer hoodie suddenly seemed too tight around his neck as he swallowed hard. His eyes darted around the room, seeking support, but found none. Behind Hawk, leather jackets rustled as the bikers stood up one by one. They didn't move forward or make any threatening gestures. They didn't need to. Their presence alone filled the space, commanding attention and respect. The sound of 200 chairs scraping against the floor echoed through the diner like rolling thunder. Corey's friends shifted uncomfortably in their seats, suddenly very interested in their half-empty glasses of soda. The boy who had been laughing the loudest at Corey's jokes just moments ago now stared intently at his phone. Another friend picked at his napkin, avoiding eye contact. Maya watched the scene unfold, her heart pounding in her chest. She'd dealt with difficult customers before, but this was different. The air felt charged with electricity, like the moment before a storm breaks. Corey pushed his chair back and stood up, trying to maintain his facade of confidence. But his hands were shaking as he adjusted his expensive watch, a nervous habit that betrayed his fear. His eyes kept darting between Hawk's steady gaze and the wall of bikers behind him. Before the situation could escalate further, Hawk turned to address the entire restaurant. His voice carried easily across the space, firm but not threatening. He raised his hand, and the bikers responded to his signal with practiced precision. "We'll take the whole menu," he announced, his eyes sweeping across the diner before settling warmly on Maya. "Everything on it. And it's all on our tab." He paused, letting his words sink in. "Everyone here deserves to eat in peace." The tension in the room shifted, transforming into something different. Surprise, confusion, and for some, relief. Maya felt a weight lift from her shoulders, even as her mind tried to process what was happening. The entire menu? For everyone? The bikers began settling back into their seats, leather creaking and boots scuffing. Their movements were unhurried, deliberate, sending a clear message that they weren't going anywhere. Corey remained standing, his earlier bravado completely deflated, looking lost in his own hometown diner. Maya's legs felt shaky as she made her way to the back of the diner. Her heart was still racing from the confrontation, but something else tugged at her attention. The biker's presence had shifted the entire atmosphere of the restaurant, and now she could hear their low murmurs drifting through the kitchen door. She paused near the coffee station, busying herself with restocking supplies while Hawk's deep voice carried over to where she stood. "David, you haven't touched your water," Hawk said, his tone gentle but worried. "The doctor said you need to stay hydrated, brother." Maya's hands slowed as she arranged the sugar packets, trying not to make it obvious that she was listening. Through the small window in the kitchen door, she could see a large man with graying temples, AMZ, wave off Hawk's concern. "I'm fine," David insisted. But his voice was thin, lacking the strength that seemed to characterize the rest of the group. "Just not thirsty right now. Anyone else need anything?" Hawk asked, looking around at his gathered family of bikers. "Speaking of which, has anyone checked on David's prescriptions? We need to make sure we're stocked up for the next few weeks." Maya watched as several of the bikers nodded, their typical tough exterior softening as they discussed their friends' needs. One of them pulled out a small notebook, jotting down notes about medication schedules. "The new treatment's been rough," someone mentioned quietly. "But we're here, brother. Whatever you need." Maya's chest tightened as she observed their interaction. These weren't just tough guys showing up to defend her. They were here supporting one of their own through what sounded like a serious illness. The realization hit her hard. They had chosen her diner as their gathering place, a spot where they could keep an eye on their sick friend while also standing up against the injustice they'd witnessed. She looked down at her trembling hands, remembering how quickly they'd jumped to her defense. It wasn't just about putting Corey in his place. These men, who most people would cross the street to avoid, were showing more humanity than the respectable customers who'd sat silently through her harassment. Through the window, she could see David resting his head in his hands, obviously tired. Another biker quietly slid a glass of water closer to him, while Hawk kept one eye on his friend and another on the rest of the diner. The care in their actions was unmistakable. Maya pressed her hand against her chest, feeling the weight of their kindness. What had started as a simple confrontation with some disrespectful teenagers had revealed itself to be something far more complex. These men weren't just passing through, they were creating a space where both she and their ailing brother could find some peace. She watched as Hawk squeezed David's shoulder, the simple gesture speaking volumes about their brotherhood. The tough exterior they presented to the world masked a deep well of compassion and loyalty. Maya felt her eyes growing moist as she realized she wasn't just witnessing an act of protection, she was seeing real love in action. The coffee pot she'd been pretending to clean was long since spotless. But Maya stayed rooted to her spot, processing this new understanding. The biker's presence wasn't just about her, or even about teaching Corey a lesson. It was about creating a safe harbor for all of them, a place where both she and David could find refuge from their different but equally challenging battles. Maya wiped her hands on her apron, taking a deep breath to steady herself. The diner had settled into an unusual quiet, broken only by the gentle clink of silverware and the low rumble of bikers' voices. She glanced at the teenagers' table. They were subdued now, heads bent low over their plates. With measured steps, she made her way to where Hawk and his group sat. The leather-clad men filled nearly every seat at the counter, their broad shoulders creating a wall of black leather. Some had removed their jackets, revealing faded t-shirts and tattooed arms. "Is everything okay over here?" Maya asked, her voice stronger than she expected. She pulled out her notepad. Though she wasn't sure why, they had ordered practically everything already. Hawk looked up from his plate of eggs and toast, his weathered face softening into a gentle smile. "Everything's perfect, Maya." He gestured to his half-empty plate. "Best breakfast I've had in years." A few of the bikers nodded in agreement, their mouths full of pancakes and bacon. One of them, an older man with gray streaks in his beard, raised his coffee cup. "Could use a refill, though, if you don't mind." Maya grabbed the coffee pot from the warmer and moved around the counter, filling cups as she went. The bikers thanked her quietly, each one meeting her eyes with respect. It was so different from the usual dismissive glances she received from customers. As she reached Hawk again, he cleared his throat softly. "You know, Maya, we ride through town pretty often." He took a sip of his fresh coffee. "Might make this our regular stop, if that's all right with you." Maya's hand trembled slightly as she set the coffee pot down. The weight of their support, ESD, these strangers who had stepped in when no one else would, pressed against her chest. "Of course," she managed to say. "You're all welcome here any time." She noticed one of the bikers at the end of the counter, thinner than the others, picking at his food. He must be David, the sick one she'd overheard Hawk mentioning. He caught her looking and gave her a weak smile. "Thank you," Hawk said, his voice low enough that only she could hear, "for letting us be here. Sometimes people see us coming and—" He shrugged, leaving the sentence unfinished. Maya nodded, understanding all too well what it felt like to be judged at first glance. Her throat felt tight as she gathered up some empty plates. The simple act of clearing dishes helped ground her, gave her something to focus on besides the overwhelming emotions threatening to spill over. She headed back toward the kitchen, her steps quick but steady. As she pushed through the swinging door, her hands began to shake again. But this time, it wasn't from fear or anger or hurt. This time, it was from the realization that in this small diner, on this ordinary day, she had found unexpected allies in the most unlikely place. Setting the dishes in the sink, Maya pressed her palms flat against the cool metal counter. She could hear the low murmur of voices from the dining room, the occasional laugh from the bikers, the normal sounds of the diner. But everything felt different now. Everything had changed. Maya's phone vibrated in her apron pocket as she cleared dishes from a recently vacated table. She usually ignored calls during her shift, but something made her pause. The number wasn't saved in her contacts, but she recognized it instantly. Tasha. Her hands trembled as she stared at the screen. 3 years had passed since their last conversation, a heated argument that ended with slammed doors and bitter tears. Maya glanced around the busy diner, then ducked into the break room, her heart pounding. "Hello?" Her voice came out barely above a whisper. "Mom?" Tasha's voice cracked on the single word. Something was wrong. Maya could hear it in her daughter's tone, a fragility she'd never associated with her headstrong child. "Tasha? What's wrong, baby?" The old endearment slipped out automatically, and Maya held her breath, worried it might push her daughter away. Instead, Tasha let out a sob. I need help, Mom." There was a pause, filled with shaky breathing. "Kevin, he's not who I thought he was." Maya's free hand gripped the edge of the break room table. She'd never met Kevin, Tasha's boyfriend of 2 years, but something in her daughter's voice made her stomach turn. "What did he do?" Maya asked softly, though she already knew the answer. "He gets so angry sometimes," Tasha whispered. "At first, it was just yelling, but now—" She broke off, and Maya could hear her trying to steady her breathing. "Last night he hit me, not for the first time." Maya closed her eyes, pain and anger washing over her. Her baby girl, her stubborn, proud daughter, was hurting, and she hadn't been there to protect her. "Where are you now? Are you safe?" Maya's voice shook with worry. "I'm at Sarah's place. My friend from work. He doesn't know where she lives." Tasha paused again. "Mom, I know I messed up. I know I said horrible things to you, but I don't know what to do." Maya's heart ached. Outside the break room, she could hear the bustling sounds of the diner, plates clattering, voices murmuring, the occasional burst of laughter. Her world had shifted in the span of a phone call, and she felt pulled in different directions. "I want to help you, baby," Maya said, her voice thick with emotion. "But I need to know you mean it this time, that you really want to fix things." "I do," Tasha said quietly. "I'm scared, Mom. I've never been this scared before." Maya thought about the scene that had just played out in the diner, the bikers standing up for her, the teenager's cruel words, the simmering tension that still hung in the air. She thought about Hawk and his sick friend, about the unexpected allies she'd found, and now her daughter needed her too. "I have to finish my shift," Maya said, checking the clock. "But I want you to stay where you are. We'll figure this out together, okay?" "Okay," Tasha replied, sounding both relieved and uncertain. "Thank you, Mom." After they hung up, Maya leaned against the wall, feeling the weight of everything pressing down on her chest. The confrontation with Corey and his friends still burned fresh in her mind, and she could feel the eyes of the other customers on her whenever she stepped onto the floor. Now, with Tasha's situation, it felt like too much to handle at once. She pressed her hands to her face, trying to steady herself. Her daughter needed her, but she was already drowning in her own struggles. How could she be strong enough for both of them? The weight in her chest grew heavier as she straightened her apron, knowing she had to return to work. The diner wouldn't wait, but her heart was already with her daughter, trying to bridge the years of silence between them. Maya's hands trembled slightly as she carried a fresh pot of coffee toward the dining area. The morning sun streamed through the windows, casting long shadows across the worn linoleum floor. The diner was quieter than usual, the regular breakfast crowd speaking in hushed tones. Her eyes immediately went to the corner booth where Corey and his friends sat huddled together. Though they weren't as loud as yesterday, their presence still made her stomach clench. She could hear their muttered complaints as she approached neighboring tables. "Can't believe those bikers think they run this place now," Corey grumbled, his designer hoodie pulled up around his face. His voice carried just enough for Maya to hear. "My dad says they're nothing but trouble." One of his friends shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "Maybe we should just eat somewhere else." "No way," Corey snapped, though his voice lacked yesterday's confidence. "This is our spot. We were here first." Maya focused on refilling coffee cups at nearby tables, trying to keep her breathing steady. The other customers smiled at her warmly, a marked difference from their usual indifference. Word had spread quickly about yesterday's events. The bell above the door chimed, and Maya's heart skipped as several bikers walked in, Hawk among them. They moved with the same quiet authority as before, taking seats at the counter. The tension in the room shifted immediately. Corey and his friends hunched lower in their booth, their earlier bravado evaporating. Maya could hear them whispering furiously among themselves. "This is ridiculous," Corey muttered, but his voice shook slightly. "They can't just come in here and—" "Dude, just shut up," one of his friends hissed. "You want them to hear you?" Maya moved between tables with practiced efficiency, aware of the delicate balance in the room. The regular customers seemed caught between curiosity and concern, stealing glances at both the bikers and Corey's group. As she approached Corey's table with the coffee pot, she noticed his hands were clenched into fists on the table. His friends kept their eyes down, suddenly very interested in their menus. "More coffee?" Maya asked, her voice professional and steady. Corey's jaw worked back and forth, but he managed a tight nod. As she poured, she could feel the anger radiating off him, not the entitled rage of yesterday, but something more frustrated and impotent. He mumbled, but the words held more sullen resignation than threat. Maya finished pouring and moved away, her steps measured and calm. She could feel Corey and his friends watching her, their earlier swagger replaced by simmering resentment. They spoke in harsh whispers, casting furtive glances at the bikers. As she worked her way around the diner, Maya felt a subtle shift in the atmosphere. The regular customers seemed to be sitting up straighter, making eye contact with her, offering small smiles. It was as if yesterday's events had broken through some invisible barrier. Across the room, Hawk sat at the counter, his presence both reassuring and commanding. His silver hair caught the morning light, and his weathered face held a quiet dignity. As Maya moved behind the counter to grab fresh silverware, she found herself looking in his direction. As if sensing her gaze, Hawk turned slightly. Their eyes met across the bustling diner, and he gave her a small, deliberate nod. It wasn't much, just a simple gesture, but it carried the weight of understanding, of shared purpose. Maya felt something warm spread through her chest. For the first time in years of working at the diner, she didn't feel alone. That simple nod spoke volumes. She had allies, people who would stand with her. The feeling was foreign but welcome, like finding solid ground after years of uncertainty. Maya wiped down the counter with slow, deliberate strokes, watching as Hawk and his bikers settled into their usual spots. The morning light streamed through the diner's windows, casting long shadows across the checkered floor. The regular customers had grown used to the bikers' presence over the past few days, though they still drew curious glances. The bell above the door chimed, and Mrs. Peterson, the bank manager's wife, hurried in with her usual group of friends. Maya noticed they chose a table far from the bikers, their heads bent close together in whispered conversation. "Did you hear what happened at the country club?" Mrs. Peterson's voice carried across the diner despite her attempt to whisper. "Charles Wilson. You know, Corey's father. He was telling everyone about these hooligans." Maya's hand tightened around her cleaning cloth. She kept wiping, trying to appear busy while listening. "I heard they're part of some dangerous gang," another woman added, her pearl necklace clicking against her coffee cup. "The Wilsons say they've been causing trouble all up and down the coast." The whispers grew louder, spreading from table to table like wildfire. Maya watched as other customers began to eye the bikers with renewed suspicion. Even old Mr. Johnson, who'd been coming to the diner for 20 years, kept glancing nervously at his newspaper, his eggs growing cold. During her next trip to the kitchen, Maya overheard Tom, the cook, talking to Jenny, another waitress. "Boss got a call from the Chamber of Commerce this morning," Tom said, flipping a pancake with more force than necessary. "The Wilsons are throwing their weight around, saying these bikers are bad for business. I heard they're threatening to pull their investments from any business that serves them," Jenny whispered, her eyes wide. "You know how many places the Wilsons own in this town?" Maya's stomach churned as she loaded plates onto her tray. The Wilsons owned half the commercial real estate in town, including the building that housed the diner. Their influence stretched from the local newspaper to the city council. Back in the dining room, she noticed several customers paying their bills early, leaving with backward glances at the bikers. Hawk and his friends seemed oblivious to the tension, focused on their meals and quiet conversations. Maya caught snippets of their talk, nothing about violence or crime, just worried discussions about medical bills and family matters. During her break, Maya slipped into the employee bathroom, needing a moment alone. Through the thin walls, she could hear the kitchen staff talking. "They're saying these bikers have criminal records," someone said. "The Wilsons are demanding the diner ban them or face consequences." "But they haven't done anything wrong," another voice protested. "They're actually our best customers lately." "Doesn't matter. You know how things work in this town. What the Wilsons want, the Wilsons get." Maya leaned against the cool tile wall, feeling the weight of the situation pressing down on her shoulders. The bikers had stood up for her when no one else would, and now they were being painted as criminals simply because they'd challenged Corey Wilson's bad behavior. She could feel the growing divide in the diner, the tension between those who supported the bikers and those who feared the Wilsons' influence. As she returned to work, Maya noticed several regular customers avoiding her gaze. The whispers followed her around the diner like shadows, and she could sense the pressure building. The simple act of serving coffee had become a political statement, and she found herself caught in the middle of a storm she never asked for. Maya wiped down the counter for the third time, her movements mechanical as she watched the bikers file in through the winter night front door. Their leather jackets gleamed under the diner's fluorescent lights, and their heavy boots thumped against the worn linoleum floor. The usual morning crowd had thinned considerably, leaving several empty booths that would normally be filled with regulars sipping their coffee. The bikers settled into their usual spots, their voices low but steady as they discussed something among themselves. Maya noticed how they kept glancing toward the windows, where occasional passers-by would slow down to stare or shake their heads in disapproval. Hawk sat at the counter, his weathered hands wrapped around a steaming cup of coffee. His silver hair caught the light, and the creases around his eyes seemed deeper than usual. "Maya," he called softly. "Got a minute?" She nodded and moved closer, pretending to wipe the already spotless counter. "What's on your mind?" Hawk's eyes met hers, filled with a mixture of concern and determination. "We've been hearing things," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "about how we're running off your customers, about how the town's getting restless with us being here." Maya's hands stilled on the counter. She'd heard the whispers, too. How some folks were calling the bikers troublemakers. How Corey's parents were spreading stories about gang activity. "I've heard," she admitted. "Look," Hawk continued, "we know our presence is making things harder for you. The last thing we wanted was to cause more problems." He paused, taking a sip of his coffee. "But we're not backing down. Not now, not ever." Behind them, several of the bikers nodded in agreement. One of them, an older man with kind eyes whom Maya now knew as David, coughed quietly into his hand. The others immediately turned to check on him, their concern evident in their faces. "See that?" Hawk gestured toward David. "We take care of our own. Always have, always will. And right now, you're one of our own." Maya felt her throat tighten with emotion. She watched as the bikers interacted with each other, the gentle pat on David's back, the way they shifted to make him more comfortable, the silent understanding that passed between them. "We've all faced our share of prejudice," Hawk explained, his voice growing stronger. "People see the leather, the bikes. They make assumptions. But we know who we are. We stand up for what's right, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard." A warmth spread through Maya's chest as she listened. She thought about all the times she'd stayed quiet, all the times she'd swallowed her pride and dignity just to keep the peace. But watching these men, these supposedly dangerous bikers, show such unwavering loyalty and courage made something shift inside her. "The town can talk all they want," Hawk said, straightening his shoulders. "We've weathered worse storms. Question is, are you ready for this fight? Because if you want us to leave, say the word. We'll understand." Maya looked around at the faces of the bikers, faces that had become familiar over the past few days. She saw strength in their eyes, but also kindness. She saw the way they protected David, the way they watched out for each other, the way they'd stood up for her without hesitation. For the first time in years, Maya felt something solid and sure beneath her feet. The weight of others' judgment seemed lighter somehow, balanced against the strength of these unexpected allies. She might be caught in the middle of this storm, but she wasn't alone anymore. Looking back at Hawk, Maya straightened her own shoulders, mirroring his stance. The decision settled in her heart, clear and true, even as the complications of their situation loomed large. Maya sat in her small kitchen, stirring a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. The morning sun cast long shadows across her worn linoleum floor, and the quiet of her apartment felt heavy. Her cell phone lay on the table, screen dark, but she couldn't stop staring at it. The events of the past few days swirled in her mind like leaves caught in a storm. The bikers, the rumors, the growing tension at the diner. The sudden buzz of her phone made her jump. Tasha's name flashed across the screen. Maya's heart clenched as she picked up the call. "Mom?" Tasha's voice was barely above a whisper. "I need help." Maya gripped the phone tighter. "What's wrong, baby?" He got really mad last night." Tasha's words came out in short bursts between quiet sobs. "I can't do this anymore. He threw things. And I'm scared, Mom. Really scared." Maya closed her eyes, her free hand pressed against her chest. The weight of her daughter's pain crashed into her like a physical force. "Where are you now? Are you safe?" "I'm at work. He doesn't know I'm calling." Tasha's voice cracked. "But I don't know what to do. I don't have anywhere to go." Maya stood up and began pacing her small kitchen. The morning light caught the dust motes dancing in the air, and she thought about the diner, about Hawk and his bikers, about the brewing storm with Corey's family. She had finally found people willing to stand up for her, to fight alongside her. But her daughter needed her. "I have some money saved," Maya said softly. "We could get you a bus ticket, and you could stay with me until—" "Really?" The hope in Tasha's voice made Maya's throat tight. "But what about your job? I know things are hard there right now. I saw the posts online about those bikers." Maya's hand trembled as she set her coffee cup in the sink. "Baby, you're more important than any of that. But Mom, you've worked so hard, and now you finally have people supporting you." Tasha's voice trailed off. "I feel terrible asking for help when you're dealing with so much." Maya sank into her chair, feeling the weight of both situations pressing down on her shoulders. The diner had become more than just a workplace. It was where she was finally learning to stand up for herself, to fight back against the kind of treatment she'd endured for years. And the bikers, they had become like family. "Listen to me," Maya said, her voice stronger than she felt. "You're my daughter. Nothing is more important than getting you safe." Tasha's sob caught in her throat. "He said he'd find me if I left. He knows people, Mom." "What if—" "We'll figure it out," Maya interrupted, even as doubt gnawed at her stomach. "We'll find a way." The call ended with promises to talk again soon, to make plans. Maya set the phone down with trembling hands, staring at nothing. The morning light had shifted, casting different shadows across her kitchen floor. Her coffee cup sat abandoned in the sink, a perfect metaphor for how she felt. Left standing alone, with too many problems and no clear solutions. Her hands shook as she covered her face, the weight of everything pressing down on her shoulders: the diner, the bikers, Corey's family, and now Tasha. It felt like too much, like she was being pulled in too many directions at once. The strength she'd found over the past few days seemed to slip through her fingers like water, leaving her feeling more alone than ever. Maya sat in her small kitchen, staring at her phone. Her daughter's number glowed on the screen, a reminder of their last conversation. The morning sun filtered through the worn curtains, casting shadows across her coffee cup. She thought about Tasha's trembling voice, the fear hidden beneath her words. Taking a deep breath, Maya pressed the call button. Each ring felt like an eternity, until finally, Tasha's voice came through, quiet and hesitant. "Mom? Baby, I've been thinking," Maya said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "I want you to come home. We'll figure this out together." There was a long pause on the other end. He won't let me leave easily." "You're not alone anymore," Maya assured her. "I've got people who can help." As she spoke those words, Maya realized how true they were. The bikers weren't just customers anymore. They had become her unexpected allies, her strength. Later that morning, at the diner, Maya noticed a sleek black car pull up outside. Through the window, she recognized Mr. and Mrs. Henderson, Corey's parents. They stepped out, dressed in expensive clothes that seemed to announce their status to everyone around them. "Hawk," Maya called softly to the biker leader who sat at his usual spot at the counter. "They're here." Hawk turned slowly on his stool, his weathered face calm but alert. The other bikers, scattered throughout the diner, straightened in their seats. The bell above the door chimed as the Hendersons walked in. "Mrs." Henderson's heels clicked sharply against the floor as she marched straight to Maya, her husband following close behind. "We need to discuss the harassment our son has been experiencing," Mrs. Henderson announced loudly, her voice carrying across the diner. "These people," she gestured dismissively toward the bikers, "have no right to threaten a minor." Maya felt her hands begin to shake, but she stood straighter. "Your son wasn't threatened, Mrs. Henderson. He was asked to show basic human respect." "How dare you?" Mr. Henderson stepped forward, his face reddening. "Do you know who we are in this town? We know exactly who you are." Hawk's deep voice cut through the tension as he stood up. Other bikers rose too, not threatening, but present. "Just like we know exactly what your boy did." David, the sick biker Maya had learned about, spoke up from his corner table. Despite his illness, his voice carried strength. "We've seen too many people hurt by folks who think money makes them better than others." Maya looked around at these men and women in leather, who had chosen to stand with her. She thought of Tasha, finally ready to come home, and felt something shift inside her. The trembling in her hands stopped. "Your son needs to learn that actions have consequences," Maya said firmly. "Not everyone will back down just because you have money." Hendersons looked around the diner, seeming to realize for the first time that they were outnumbered, not just by the bikers, but by the other customers who watched with disapproving eyes. Their usual tactics of intimidation weren't working here. "This isn't over," Mrs. Henderson hissed, but her voice had lost some of its confidence. "You're right," Maya agreed, surprising herself with her calmness. "But it's going to be different from now on." The bikers moved closer, forming a protective circle around Maya. She felt their strength, their solidarity. For the first time in years, she wasn't fighting her battles alone. She had people in her corner, not just for herself, but for Tasha too. Looking at the Hendersons' angry faces, Maya knew the confrontation was far from over. But with the steady presence of the bikers behind her, she felt ready for whatever came next. Maya stood near the kitchen entrance, her hands clasped tightly together as she watched Mr. Thompson, the diner's owner, pace back and forth. His usually timid demeanor had transformed into something she'd never seen before. The morning sun streamed through the windows, casting long shadows across the empty restaurant before opening hours. "I've stayed quiet too long, Mr." Thompson said, his voice trembling but determined. "These people think they can bully us because they have money? Not anymore." Hawk sat at the counter, his weathered hands wrapped around a coffee mug. Several other bikers lined the counter, their presence reassuring in the early morning quiet. Maya felt her heart swell with gratitude as she watched Mr. Thompson straighten his shoulders. "The Petersons, Corey's parents, they're coming in today," Mr. Thompson announced. "They want to discuss the biker problem." He made air quotes with his fingers, his face flushing with anger. "Well, I have something to say about their son's behavior problem instead." The bell above the door chimed, and Maya's co-worker Sarah rushed in, waving a handful of papers. "Look at this!" she exclaimed, spreading them across the counter. They were letters, dozens of them, from regular customers supporting the diner and the bikers. "Mrs. Chen from the flower shop wrote this one," Sarah said, holding up a page covered in neat handwriting. "She says she's never felt safer than when the bikers are here. And this one's from Pastor Williams. He's offering to speak up about how the bikers helped repair the church roof last month." Maya felt tears prick at her eyes as she scanned the letters. All this time, she'd thought they were alone in this fight. But the community had been watching, and they'd been taking notes. The door chimed again. Mr. and Mrs. Peterson strode in, dressed in expensive clothes that seemed out of place in the humble diner. Mrs. Peterson's lips curled in disgust when she saw the bikers. "Thompson, Mr." Peterson barked. "This has gone on long enough. These people are bad for business. They're scaring away customers." Hawk didn't move from his seat, but his presence seemed to fill the room. "Mr." Thompson walked forward, the letters clutched in his hand. "Actually, Mr. Peterson," he said, his voice steady, "I have evidence that says otherwise, but more importantly, I have something to say about your son's behavior." Mrs. Peterson's face reddened. "How dare you?" "No, Mr." Thompson cut her off. "How dare your son treat my employees like that? How dare you try to bully us into turning away paying customers who've shown nothing but respect?" Maya watched in amazement as more bikers filed in through the door, filling the diner with their quiet strength. Mr. Peterson's face paled as he realized he was outnumbered, not just by the bikers, but by the determination in Mr. Thompson's eyes. "These men and women are welcome here," Mr. Thompson declared. "Your money doesn't give you the right to decide otherwise. And if your son can't behave with basic human decency, then he's the one who's not welcome." The Petersons stood frozen, their power play crumbling before their eyes. Mrs. Peterson grabbed her husband's arm, tugging him toward the door. "This isn't over," she hissed, but her voice lacked conviction. As they stormed out, the diner erupted in cheers. Maya felt a weight lift from her shoulders as she watched them go. Mr. Thompson slumped against the counter, looking both exhausted and proud. "Well," he said with a small smile, "I guess we showed them." Hawk raised his coffee mug in a silent toast, and the other bikers followed suit. The morning sun seemed brighter somehow, warming the diner with promise. Maya looked around at these people, her unlikely allies, and felt a surge of pride so strong it brought fresh tears to her eyes. Maya found David sitting alone at the counter during the slow afternoon hours. His shoulders were hunched, and his usual warm smile seemed forced. She'd noticed him growing quieter over the past few days, his face a shade paler than usual. "Coffee?" she asked, already reaching for the pot. David nodded, his large hands wrapping around the empty mug in front of him. "Thanks, Maya." His voice was rough, tired. She filled his cup and was about to move on when he spoke again. "You ever feel like you're carrying something so heavy you might break under the weight of it?" Maya paused, setting down the coffee pot. The diner was nearly empty, just a couple of regulars scattered in the booths. She leaned against the counter, giving David her full attention. "Every day," she answered honestly. David's fingers tightened around his mug. "I haven't told the others how bad it's getting." He took a shaky breath. "The treatments aren't working like they should, doctor says." He trailed off, staring into his coffee. Maya felt her heart squeeze. She'd suspected something was wrong, but hearing it from him made it real. "Why haven't you told them? They've got enough to worry about." David's voice cracked slightly. Hawk's already stretched thin, looking out for everyone. "The others, they see me as the strong one. Can't let them see me falling apart." Maya reached across the counter and placed her hand over his. His skin was warm, but she could feel a slight tremor in his fingers. "That's not how family works," she said softly. "And that's what you all are, isn't it? Family?" David looked up, his eyes glistening. "Yeah, we are. But that's exactly why I can't burden them. They'd drop everything to help. And I don't want to be the reason they stop living their lives." Maya thought about Tasha, about all the years she'd spent trying to handle everything alone. Sometimes the heaviest burden is the one we carry by ourselves. Letting others help isn't weakness, it's trust. David wiped his eyes quickly with the back of his hand. "I'm scared, Maya. Not of dying, exactly. More of leaving them behind. Of not being there when they need me." "Then let them be there for you now," Maya said firmly. "Let them share this with you while they can." David's shoulders slumped, as if releasing a weight he'd been carrying for too long. Will you be there too, when I tell them?" Maya squeezed his hand. "Of course I will. You've all stood by me. It's time I returned the favor." A ghost of a smile crossed David's face. "You know, when we first started coming here, we thought we were helping you. Turns out maybe we needed you just as much." Later, sitting in her car in the empty parking lot, Maya watched the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. David's words echoed in her mind. She thought about the bikers, about how they'd become so much more than just customers. They were teaching her about loyalty, about standing together against life's storms. Her hands gripped the steering wheel as she felt tears well up in her eyes. These men, with their leather jackets and gruff exteriors, had shown her what true brotherhood looked like. And now, as one of them faced his darkest battle, she knew she wouldn't let him face it alone. The weight of David's confession sat heavy in her chest, but alongside it was a fierce determination. She was part of something bigger now, a family forged not by blood, but by choice and circumstance. And family, she was learning, meant standing together, no matter what came next. Maya's hands trembled as she unfolded the small piece of paper she'd found tucked under her order pad. The diner's morning rush had just ended, leaving her a moment to catch her breath in the quiet kitchen. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as her eyes scanned the carefully printed words. "Leave the bikers alone, or else." The threat was simple, but it sent chills down her spine. She leaned against the stainless steel counter, her legs suddenly weak. The paper shook in her hands as she read it again, hoping somehow the words would change. "You okay there, Maya?" asked Betty, one of the kitchen staff, wiping her hands on her apron as she approached. Maya quickly crumpled the note and shoved it into her pocket. "I'm fine," she said, forcing a smile. "Just needed a minute." But she wasn't fine. The weight of everything, David's illness, Tasha's situation, and now this, pressed down on her like a heavy blanket. She'd faced discrimination before, weathered countless storms of prejudice. But this felt different, more dangerous. Throughout her shift, Maya found herself jumping at every sudden noise. The clatter of plates made her flinch. Each time the door opened, her heart raced, wondering if the note's author had returned. She caught herself studying customers' faces, trying to guess who might have left it. The bikers weren't there today. They usually came in the afternoon, and Maya felt strangely vulnerable without their presence. She'd grown used to their quiet strength, the way they filled the diner with an unspoken promise of protection. Now, the space felt empty, exposed. During her break, Maya sat in her car, hands gripping the steering wheel. She could just drive away, find another job in another town, start fresh where nobody knew her name or her story. The thought was tempting, so tempting it scared her. She pulled out her phone and stared at Tasha's number. Her daughter needed her now more than ever. But how could she help Tasha if she couldn't even keep herself safe? The anonymous threat echoed in her mind, making her question every decision she'd made since the day the bikers first walked in. Back home that evening, Maya stood in front of her bathroom mirror, studying her reflection. The woman staring back at her looked tired, worried. But there was something else there, too. Something that reminded her of her mother's face when times got tough. She pulled the crumpled note from her pocket and read it one more time. The words seemed to mock her, challenging everything she believed about standing up for what's right. Her hand shook as she set it down on the counter. "Maybe I should just go," she whispered to her reflection. The woman in the mirror looked uncertain, afraid. Maya watched as a tear rolled down her cheek, dropping silently into the sink. She thought about David, fighting his battle with cancer without complaint. About Hawk and his quiet strength. About Tasha, finally reaching out after all these years. And about herself. All the times she'd swallowed her pride, stayed quiet, kept her head down. The bathroom light cast harsh shadows as Maya gripped the edges of the sink, her knuckles white with tension. The decision weighed heavy on her shoulders. Stay, and face whatever was coming, or run, and leave everything, and everyone, behind. Her reflection offered no answers, only the same troubled expression that had been haunting her all day. The choice loomed before her like a fork in the road, each path equally daunting. Maya stood there, frozen between fight and flight, as the evening shadows lengthened around her. Maya pulled up to the small apartment complex on the outskirts of town. Her hands gripped the steering wheel tight, her knuckles white with tension. The building looked run down, with peeling paint and rusty railings. This was where her daughter had ended up. The stairs creaked under her feet as she climbed to the second floor. At apartment 2B, she hesitated, then knocked. The door opened slowly, and there stood Tasha, her eyes red and puffy from crying. "Mom," Tasha whispered, her voice breaking. Maya's heart clenched at the sight of her daughter. Tasha had lost weight, and a fading bruise marked her cheek. Without thinking, Maya stepped forward and wrapped her arms around her child. Tasha stiffened at first, then melted into the embrace, sobbing against her mother's shoulder. Inside the apartment, They sat on a worn couch. Empty takeout containers littered the coffee table, and clothes were scattered across the floor. Maya noticed there were no pictures on the walls, no signs of a happy home. "I'm sorry," Tasha said, wiping her eyes. "I should have listened to you about him, about everything." Maya reached for her daughter's hand. "Baby, we both made mistakes. I wasn't there when you needed me most. I was so caught up in my own problems, working double shifts, trying to make ends meet. No, Mom, you were doing your best." Tasha's voice shook. "I was the one who ran away. I was the one who thought I knew better." The weight of unspoken words hung between them, years of missed birthdays, holidays, and daily moments that should have been shared. Maya thought about all the times she'd picked up the phone to call, only to put it down again, afraid of rejection. "He hits me," Tasha admitted quietly. "At first, it was just yelling, then pushing. Now—" She trailed off, unable to finish. Maya's chest tightened with anger and grief. "You can come home with me," she said firmly. "Right now. We'll get your things." "I can't just leave," Tasha interrupted, fear creeping into her voice. "He'll find me. He always does." Maya squeezed her daughter's hand. "Things are different now. I have people who can help us, friends who understand what it means to protect their own." Tasha looked up, confusion mixing with hope in her eyes. "The bikers? I heard about what happened at the diner." "Yes," Maya nodded. "They taught me something important. Sometimes standing up for what's right means accepting help from unexpected places." Tears rolled down Tasha's cheeks. "I've missed you so much, Mom. I was too proud to admit it. But I thought about you every day. I thought about you too, baby. Every single day." Maya pulled her daughter close again, feeling the trembling in Tasha's thin frame. They spent the next hour making plans. Maya would come back tomorrow with help to move Tasha's belongings. The bikers would ensure her safety. It wouldn't be easy, but they would face it together. As Maya prepared to leave, Tasha grabbed her arm. "Mom, I'm scared." Maya cupped her daughter's face gently. "I know, baby, but you're stronger than you think. We both are." Walking back to her car, Maya felt the weight of the day settling on her shoulders. The diner situation was far from resolved, and David's illness weighed heavily on her mind. But seeing Tasha, holding her daughter again, had awakened something in her Emma, a fierce determination to protect what mattered most. She sat in her car, watching Tasha's window until the light went out. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges. But for now, she allowed herself to feel both the joy of reconciliation and the ache of a mother's heart. Maya wiped down the counter at the diner, her movements slow and deliberate. The morning sun streamed through the windows, casting long shadows across the empty tables. Her mind wandered to Tasha, their conversation still fresh in her thoughts. The bell above the door chimed, pulling her attention back to the present. Corey walked in alone, his usual swagger noticeably absent. His designer hoodie hung loose on his frame, and dark circles shadowed his eyes. Maya's grip tightened on the cleaning cloth, her heart racing as she watched him approach the counter. "Can I sit?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Maya nodded, setting aside her cloth. She noticed how his shoulders slumped, how his eyes couldn't quite meet hers. This wasn't the same boy who had spat cruel words at her just days ago. "Coffee?" she offered, already reaching for a cup. "Yeah, thanks." Corey fidgeted with a paper napkin, tearing it into tiny pieces. I've been thinking about what happened." Maya poured the coffee, steam rising between them like a barrier. She said nothing, giving him space to continue. "My parents," he started, then shook his head. "No, that's not right. I can't blame them. What I did, what I said to you." His voice cracked slightly. The diner door opened again, and a few bikers walked in, including Hawk. They took their usual spots at the far end of the counter, watching the interaction with quiet intensity. "I was wrong," Corey continued, his words coming faster now. "I treated you like you weren't even human." "Like you were." He swallowed hard. "I've never had anyone stand up to me like that before. The bikers." "Yeah, but it wasn't just them. It was you. You kept your dignity even when I tried to take it away." Maya's hands trembled slightly as she set the coffee pot down. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I'm sorry." Corey looked up, finally meeting her eyes. "I'm really, really sorry. What I did was racist and cruel, and you didn't deserve any of it. I know saying sorry doesn't fix anything, but I needed you to know that I understand now. What I did was wrong." The words hung in the air between them. Maya felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes, but she blinked them away. This wasn't the apology she'd expected, but it was the one she needed to hear. "Thank you," she said softly. "That means something." Corey nodded, his own eyes glistening. "I want to make it right. I told my parents to stop spreading rumors about the bikers. I told them the truth about what happened, about how I behaved." From the end of the counter, Hawk raised his coffee cup in a silent salute. Maya felt a wave of emotion wash over her, not just relief, but a profound sense of vindication. Her strength, combined with the bikers' support, had created this moment of transformation. "We all make mistakes," Maya said, reaching across the counter to touch Corey's hand briefly. "It's what we do after that matters." Corey managed a small smile, the first genuine one she'd ever seen from him. The weight of their confrontation seemed to lift, leaving behind something new. Not friendship, exactly, but understanding. Maya turned away, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. The relief she felt was powerful, like finally setting down a heavy burden she'd carried for too long. But even as she savored this victory, she could feel the tension in the air. The town's whispers hadn't stopped, and Corey's parents still wielded their influence. This battle might be won, but the war for respect and dignity wasn't over yet. The community center buzzed with angry voices as Maya walked through the door. The room was packed. Regular customers from the diner, town officials, and concerned citizens filled every seat. At the front, Corey's parents sat with their lawyer, their faces tight with disapproval. The bikers lined the back wall, their leather vests a stark contrast to the business-casual attire of everyone else. Maya's hands trembled as she made her way to the podium. The microphone squealed slightly as she adjusted it, and the room fell silent. She could feel everyone's eyes on her. Some supportive, others hostile. Hawk gave her an encouraging nod from the back. "I've worked at the diner for 15 years, Maya began, her voice shaky at first but growing stronger. "In all that time, I've served everyone who came through those doors with respect, but respect isn't always given in return." She paused, looking directly at Corey's parents. "Your son called me horrible names. He treated me like I wasn't even human, and no one, not one person in that diner, stood up for me until the bikers came in." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Maya continued, "I know what some of you think about them. You see their leather and their motorcycles, and you make assumptions. But these men showed more dignity and humanity than anyone else that day. They didn't use violence. They didn't threaten anyone. They just stood up and said, 'This isn't right.' David, pale from his cancer treatments but determined to be there, stepped forward. 'We're not a gang,' he said firmly. 'We're veterans, teachers, mechanics, regular people who believe in standing up for what's right.' Maya showed us kindness when she learned about my illness. She's family now." Maya felt tears welling up in her eyes but pushed on. "This isn't just about me anymore. It's about who we want to be as a community." Do we want to be people who look the other way when someone is being hurt? Or do we want to be people who stand together? The room was completely silent now. Even Corey's parents seemed affected by her words. Maya took a deep breath and continued, "Your son apologized to me yesterday. It wasn't easy for him, but he did it. He showed more courage in that moment than many adults I know. Maybe we can all learn something from that." Hawk stepped forward, his presence commanding attention. "We're not here to cause trouble," he said. "We're here because sometimes doing the right thing means standing up, even when it's uncomfortable, even when people might misunderstand you." The town council members exchanged glances. The mayor, who had been quietly listening, stood up. "Perhaps," she said slowly, "we've been too quick to judge. This situation has revealed both the worst and the best in our community." One by one, other community members began to speak up. A regular customer from the diner shared how the bikers had helped change her tire one rainy night. Another spoke about seeing them organize a food drive for veterans. The atmosphere in the room began to shift. Maya watched as understanding dawned on faces throughout the room. The bikers weren't the threat. Prejudice and silence in the face of wrongdoing were the real enemies. As people continued to share their stories, she felt a warmth spread through her chest. This was what community looked like. People coming together, listening to each other, standing up for what's right. The meeting wasn't perfect. Some people still looked skeptical, and Corey's parents left without speaking. But something had changed. As people filed out of the community center, many stopped to shake hands with the bikers or share a kind word with Maya. It wasn't a complete victory, but it was a start. The morning dawned gray and cool as Maya stood before the gathered crowd at Pioneer Park. Leather-clad bikers filled the first few rows of folding chairs, their usual tough expressions softened by grief. Behind them sat curious townspeople, drawn by the unusual sight of such a gathering. A simple wooden podium stood at the front, David's favorite leather jacket draped over it. His motorcycle helmet rested on top, polished to a shine. Fresh flowers surrounded the makeshift memorial, their sweet scent mixing with the crisp autumn air. Maya's hands trembled as she gripped the edges of the podium. She looked out at the sea of faces, some familiar from the diner, others she'd never seen before. Hawk sat in the front row, his weathered face showing the weight of losing his friend. "David wasn't what most people would expect," Maya began, her voice steady despite her nerves. "When I first met him at the diner, I saw what everyone else saw, a big, tough biker. But David showed me that appearances don't tell the whole story." She paused, touching the smooth leather of his jacket. Even when he was sick, David never complained. He'd come into the diner with a smile, ask about my day, and leave a generous tip. He taught me about dignity, not just by standing up for what's right, but by facing life's hardest moments with grace. Tears welled in her eyes, but Maya continued. "During his last weeks, David told me something I'll never forget. He said, 'Maya, family isn't always blood. Sometimes it's the people who stand by you when everyone else walks away.'" Several bikers nodded, wiping their eyes. In the crowd, Maya spotted Tasha, who had come to support her mother. Their eyes met, and Tasha gave her an encouraging smile. "David showed me what true loyalty looks like," Maya went on. "He didn't just talk about brotherhood. He lived it. Even when he was fighting his own battles, he never stopped fighting for others. He stood up for me when I needed it most. And he taught me that kindness isn't weakness. It's the strongest force we have." The wind rustled through the trees, carrying fallen leaves across the gathering. Maya touched the helmet on the podium, her fingers tracing its smooth surface. "David's last wish was for us to keep standing together," she said, her voice growing stronger. "He believed that when we support each other, we become something bigger than ourselves. He may have looked tough on the outside, but he had the kindest heart of anyone I've ever known. As Maya stepped back from the podium, the bikers rose as one. They formed a circle around David's memorial, their arms linked in solidarity. Hawk stepped forward, placing David's old bandana beside his helmet. One by one, other bikers added personal items, a favorite keychain, a well-worn wallet, small tokens of remembrance. Maya joined the circle, feeling the strength of their unity. These men and women, once strangers, had become her family. As they stood together in silence, she realized that David's legacy lived on in their unbreakable bond. The morning sun finally broke through the clouds, casting warm light across the gathering. In that moment of shared grief and connection, Maya felt David's presence in the unwavering support of those around her. They were more than just a group of bikers now. They were a testament to the power of standing together, just as David had taught them. The morning sun streamed through the diner's windows, casting long shadows across the freshly mopped floor. Maya stood behind the counter, arranging coffee cups with careful precision. The bell above the door chimed, and she looked up to see Mr. and Mrs. Anderson, Corey's parents, walking in. Their usual air of superiority was gone, replaced by something that looked almost like humility. The bikers sat at their regular spots, leather vests gleaming in the morning light. Hawk nodded at Maya, a silent gesture of support. The diner fell quiet as the Andersons made their way to the center of the room. "We'd like everyone's attention, please, Mr." Anderson said, his voice lacking its usual commanding tone. He cleared his throat, glancing at his wife, who squeezed his arm encouragingly. "My family and I owe this establishment, and particularly Miss Maya Johnson, a public apology." Maya's hands stilled on the coffee pot she was holding. She hadn't expected this. Not today. Not ever. Mrs. Anderson stepped forward, her designer handbag clutched tightly to her chest. "Our son's behavior was inexcusable," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "And our response to the situation was even worse. We allowed our prejudices and our pride to cloud our judgment." Mr. Anderson nodded, looking directly at Maya. "Instead of acknowledging our son's wrongdoing, we tried to shift blame. We spread rumors about these gentlemen." He gestured to the bikers, who were only standing up for what was right. "We were wrong, deeply wrong." Corey emerged from behind his parents, his shoulders hunched, looking younger and more vulnerable than Maya had ever seen him. "I'm sorry, Miss Johnson," he said, his voice cracking. "I was cruel to you, and there's no excuse for that. I've learned. I've learned a lot these past few weeks." The silence in the diner was profound. Maya felt tears pricking at her eyes but blinked them away. Hawk stood up, his chair scraping against the floor, and walked over to the Andersons. He extended his hand to Mr. Anderson. "Takes courage to admit when you're wrong," Hawk said, his deep voice carrying across the room. "We appreciate that." Mr. Anderson shook Hawk's hand, relief visible on his face. Around the diner, the tension that had been building for weeks seemed to dissolve. Regular customers who had stayed away began trickling back in, nodding to the bikers with newfound respect. Maya looked around the diner, taking in the scene before her. The morning sunlight painted everything in a warm glow. The worn booths where the bikers now sat comfortably, the counter where local factory workers shared coffee with business people, the tables where families gathered for breakfast. This place, which had been the source of so much pain, had transformed into something else entirely. She watched as Corey's family took seats at a booth, ordering breakfast like any other customers. The bikers continued their quiet conversations, their presence no longer causing whispers or scared glances. Regular patrons chatted with them, sharing stories and laughs. Maya picked up her coffee pot and moved through the diner, filling cups with a steady hand. Each step felt lighter, each smile more genuine. The weight she'd carried for so long had lifted, replaced by something warmer, something like peace. This wasn't just a diner anymore. It had become a place where wounds could heal, where barriers could break down, where people could learn to see past their differences. Maya caught her reflection in the chrome of the coffee machine and saw something she hadn't seen in a long time, hope, clear and bright in her eyes. Maya sat at the counter during the quiet afternoon lull, her fingers wrapped around a warm cup of coffee. The diner's familiar hum of conversation and clinking dishes filled the air, but something felt different now. The past few months had changed everything, not just the place, but her too. Hawk and a few other bikers were in their usual spot, their leather jackets draped over the backs of their chairs. They had become such a natural part of the diner that Maya could hardly remember what it was like before they arrived. Their presence had transformed from threatening to comforting, like old friends who had always been there. As she watched them talk and laugh, Maya thought about David. His empty seat at the counter seemed to hold the weight of his memory. He had taught her so much about standing up for what was right, about finding strength in unexpected places. His battle with cancer had shown her that courage came in many forms. The bell above the door chimed, and Maya looked up to see Tasha walking in. Her daughter's face was brighter now, free from the shadows of her past relationship. Maya's heart swelled with pride as Tasha made her way to the counter, sliding onto a stool beside her mother. "How was work?" Maya asked, pouring her daughter a cup of coffee. "Better," Tasha replied, warming her hands around the mug. "I got that promotion I was telling you about." Maya noticed how Tasha's shoulders no longer hunched forward, how she held herself with a new confidence. The change in her daughter mirrored her own transformation. They had both learned to stand tall, to face their fears head-on. Looking around the diner, Maya saw more than just customers now. She saw faces she knew, stories she understood. There was Mrs. Patterson, who had defended the bikers at the town meeting. Tom, the regular who had started bringing his teenage son in to learn about respect from Hawk. Even some of Corey's old friends now sat comfortably among the bikers, sharing jokes and stories. "You know," Tasha said softly, "I never thought I'd see this place like this. Remember how scared everyone was when the bikers first showed up?" Maya nodded, remembering that first day, the tension, the fear, Corey's cruel words. "Things change," she said. "People change." "You changed too, Mom," Tasha said, reaching over to squeeze her mother's hand. "You showed me how to be strong." The words caught in Maya's throat. She thought about all the times she had felt weak, all the times she had wanted to give up. But something had kept her going, not just for herself, but for Tasha, for David, for everyone who had ever felt powerless. Hawk caught her eye from across the room and gave her a subtle nod. Maya smiled back, feeling the strength of their unlikely alliance. The bikers had taught her about family, not the kind you're born into, but the kind you choose, the kind that stands beside you when the world turns its back. Tasha leaned her head on her mother's shoulder, a gesture so natural yet so precious after their years of distance. "I'm proud of you, Mom," she whispered. Maya wrapped an arm around her daughter, holding her close. In that moment, she felt the full circle of healing, from the broken pieces of their relationship to this quiet understanding they now shared. The diner had become more than just a workplace. It was a symbol of their journey, a testament to the power of standing together. The afternoon sun streamed through the windows, casting a warm glow over the counter where mother and daughter sat. In the peaceful silence between them, Maya felt a deep sense of belonging. She had found her voice, her strength, and most importantly, she had found her way back to her daughter. Maya moved through the diner with practiced ease, her steps lighter than they had been in years. The familiar clink of plates and murmur of conversation filled the air, but today was different. Today, the diner buzzed with an energy she'd never felt before. Every table was full. The usual morning regulars sat shoulder to shoulder with people who, just weeks ago, wouldn't have dreamed of sharing space together. Mr. Thompson, the retired mailman who'd been coming in for coffee every morning for 15 years, chatted easily with Bear, one of Hawk's most intimidating-looking bikers. They were laughing about something, their coffee cups raised in a casual toast. "More coffee, gentlemen?" Maya asked, approaching their table with a fresh pot. "Please, Maya," Mr. Thompson said, his eyes crinkling with warmth. "And I was just telling Bear here about that time in '85 when the whole town got snowed in." Maya filled their cups, her heart swelling at the simple normalcy of it all. Near the window, Sarah, the local librarian who'd once clutched her purse tighter when the bikers first arrived, was showing Hawk pictures of her grandchildren. The door chimed, and Maya looked up to see Tasha walking in. Her daughter's face was brighter these days, the shadows of her past slowly fading. She carried a large tray of homemade cookies, something they used to bake together when Tasha was little. "Mom," Tasha called out, making her way through the crowded diner. "I made the chocolate chip ones you love." Maya felt tears prick at her eyes, but blinked them away quickly. She had spent too many years crying over what was lost. Now was the time to celebrate what had been found. The diner owner, Ted, emerged from the kitchen, wiping his hands on his apron. "All right, everyone," he announced, his voice carrying over the chatter. "The pancakes are ready. Maya, you sit down for this one. Let us serve you for a change." Maya started to protest, but Hawk stood up, gently guiding her to an empty chair. "Listen to the man, Maya. You've earned this." All around her, people began to share stories. Corey's mother, who now came in regularly for lunch, talked about how her son was volunteering at the local youth center. The bikers shared tales of their cross-country rides, their adventures making the children in the diner lean in with wide-eyed wonder. Tasha sat next to her mother, their shoulders touching. It was a small gesture, but it meant everything to Maya. The distance that had grown between them over the years had finally begun to close. Ted brought out plate after plate of his famous blueberry pancakes, the same ones Maya had served thousands of times. But today she was on the receiving end, watching as her community, Sammaun, her family, came together to share a meal. The bikers, spread throughout the diner rather than clustered in their usual spot at the counter, had become such a natural part of the scene that Maya could hardly remember what it was like before they arrived. Their leather jackets mixed with business suits and casual wear, creating a tapestry of unity that would have seemed impossible just months ago. As plates were passed and syrup was drizzled, Maya caught Hawk's eye from across the room. He raised his coffee cup in a silent salute, and she nodded back, understanding passing between them. What had started as a moment of confrontation had blossomed into something beautiful, a reminder that sometimes the most unlikely circumstances could lead to the most profound changes. Maya stood at the counter, wiping it down with slow, deliberate strokes as she watched the scene unfold before her. Through the diner's large windows, she could see Hawk and three other bikers helping old Mrs. Peterson fix her rickety porch steps. Their leather vests gleamed in the morning sun as they worked, measuring and sawing wood with careful precision. A smile tugged at her lips as she remembered how, just weeks ago, these same men had been viewed with suspicion and fear. Now, they were becoming an integral part of the community's fabric. "Would you look at that?" Betty, another waitress, said as she sidled up next to Maya. "Never thought I'd see the day when those bikers would be out there doing carpentry work." Maya nodded, her chest swelling with pride. "They've always been this way. We just couldn't see it before." Through the window, she watched as Hawk showed Mrs. Peterson the repairs they'd made, his normally stern face softening as the elderly woman clasped his hand in gratitude. It reminded her of how they'd helped repair the leaky roof at the community center last week, and how they'd organized a fundraiser for the local animal shelter the week before that. The bell above the diner's door chimed, and Maya turned to see David's widow, Sarah, walking in. The woman's eyes were tired but peaceful as she made her way to her usual spot at the counter. The bikers had rallied around her after David's passing, making sure she never felt alone. "The usual, Sarah?" Maya asked, already reaching for a coffee mug. "Please," Sarah replied, managing a small smile. "The guys are heading over to paint my fence this afternoon. David always meant to do it himself." "But," she trailed off, her eyes growing misty. Maya reached across the counter and squeezed Sarah's hand. "He'd be proud of how they're taking care of you." The diner had become more than just a restaurant. It was a gathering place where barriers continued to fall. Maya watched as Tom, one of Corey's father's closest friends, shared a table with two bikers, all three men laughing over some shared joke. The sight would have been unimaginable just months ago. Outside, more bikers were arriving, their motorcycles purring to a stop in the parking lot. They carried tools and paint supplies, ready for their afternoon project at Sarah's house. Maya noticed how passing pedestrians waved at them now, how children no longer crossed to the other side of the street when they saw them coming. The transformation wasn't just in how others saw the bikers, it was in how the town saw itself. The divide between us and them had begun to blur, replaced by a sense of shared community. Maya had witnessed small acts of kindness multiply, spreading like ripples in a pond. She thought about how far they'd all come as she poured coffee for the morning crowd. The diner hummed with conversation and laughter, the sound of people who had learned to see past their prejudices and fears. Even Corey, who still came in occasionally, had changed. Just yesterday, she'd seen him hold the door open for an elderly biker, exchanging respectful nods. Looking around at the mixed crowd of bikers, business people, families, and regulars, Maya felt something settle in her heart. The weights she'd carried for so long, the pain of discrimination, the burden of silence, the fear of standing alone, had transformed into something lighter, something like hope. This wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about building something new, something stronger. As she watched another group of bikers head out to their next project, Maya knew that every small act of kindness, every bridge built between people who once stood divided, was healing not just individual hearts, but the whole town. The morning sun streamed through the diner's windows, casting warm patterns across the freshly polished floors. Maya adjusted her apron, taking in the familiar sights and sounds that had become so much more meaningful over the past few months. The coffee maker hummed, plates clinked, and the gentle murmur of conversation filled the air. She noticed something different today. The usual morning crowd had grown larger, and there was an air of anticipation. The mayor stood near the counter, chatting with Hawk, while other town officials mingled with the bikers who had become regular fixtures at the establishment. Called out Sandra, one of her longtime regulars. "Could you come here for a moment?" As Maya approached the table, she noticed more people filing in through the door. Her heart skipped a beat when she saw Tasha among them, smiling proudly. The diner was quickly becoming packed, and Maya felt a flutter of nervous energy in her stomach. The mayor cleared his throat and tapped a spoon against his coffee mug. The room fell silent. "Maya Johnson," he began, his voice carrying across the diner. "This community owes you an apology, and more importantly, a thank you." Maya's hands trembled slightly as she clutched her order pad. Hawk stood nearby, his presence reassuring as always. "What started as an unfortunate incident has become a lesson in dignity, forgiveness, and community," the mayor continued. "And we're here today because someone else would like to speak." Corey stepped forward from the crowd, looking different from the arrogant teenager who had caused so much trouble. His shoulders were squared, but his face showed humility. "Miss Johnson," he said, his voice steady but sincere, "what I did was wrong. Not just the words I used, but the attitude behind them. I've learned that real strength isn't about putting others down, it's about lifting them up." He paused, swallowing hard. Your grace under pressure taught me that. The way you handled everything, it changed me. I'm sorry, and I want everyone to know it. Maya felt tears welling up in her eyes as scattered applause broke out. She saw Tasha wiping her own eyes in the corner. The mayor stepped forward again, holding up an official-looking document. The town council has officially recognized the Brotherhood of Bikers as honorary citizens and community partners. Their presence here has reminded us that appearances can be deceiving, and that true character shows itself through actions, not assumptions. Hawk's weathered face broke into a rare smile as he accepted the certificate. The bikers, scattered throughout the diner, stood a little taller, their leather jackets gleaming in the morning light. Sandra stood up, her voice carrying clearly. Maya, you've served us coffee and meals for years, but you've given us something far more important. You've shown us what real dignity looks like. Maya looked around the diner, taking in the faces of people who had become more than customers, the bikers who had become family. Her daughter, now standing strong and free. Even Corey, who had found his way to becoming a better person. Her heart felt full to bursting as she took in this moment. The diner wasn't just a workplace anymore. It had become a symbol of transformation, a place where barriers broke down and understanding grew. She smoothed her apron, straightened her shoulders, and felt the strength of knowing exactly where she belonged.